My first summer in the Sierra by John Muir. August the 4th. It seems strange to sleep in a paltry hotel chamber after the spacious magnificence and luxury of the starry sky in Silver Fir Grove. Bade farewell to my friend and the general. The old soldier was very kind and an interesting talker. He told me long stories of the Florida Seminole War, in which he took part, and invited me to visit him in Omaha. Calling Carlo, I scrambled home through the Indian Canyon gate, rejoicing, pitying the poor professor and general, bound by clocks, almanacs, orders, duties, etc., and compelled to dwell with lowland care and dust and din, where nature is covered and her voice smothered, while the poor, insignificant wanderer enjoys the freedom and glory of God's wilderness. Apart from the human interest of my visit today, I greatly enjoyed Yosemite, which I had visited only once before, having spent 8 days last spring in rambling amid its rocks and waters. Wherever we go in the mountains, or indeed in any of God's wild fields, we find more than we seek. Descending 4,000 feet in a few hours, we enter a new world. Climate, plants, sounds, inhabitants, and scenery, all new or changed. Near camp, the Gold Cup oak forms sheets of chaparral, on top of which we may make our beds. Going down the Indian Canyon, we observe this little bush changing by regular gradations to a large bush, to a small tree, and then larger, until on the rocky taluses near the bottom of the valley, we find it develop into a broad, wide-spreading, gnarled, picturesque tree from 4 to 8 feet in diameter and 40 or 50 feet high. Innumerable are the forms of water displayed. Every gliding reach, cascade, and fall has characters of its own. Had a good view of the Vernal and Nevada, two of the main falls of the valley, less than a mile apart, and offering striking differences in voice, form, color, etc. The Vernal, 400 feet high and about 75 or 80 feet wide, drops smoothly over a round-lipped precipice and forms a superb apron of embroidery, green and white, slightly folded and fluted, maintaining this form nearly to the bottom, where it is suddenly veiled in quick-flying billows of spray and mist, in which the afternoon sunbeams play with ravishing beauty of rainbow colors. The Nevada is white from its first appearance as it leaps out into the freedom of the air. At the head, it presents a twisted appearance by an overfolding of the current from striking on the side of its channel just before the first free outbounding leap is made. About 2/3 of the way down, the hurrying throng of comet-shaped masses glance on an inclined part of the face of the precipice and are beaten into yet whiter foam, greatly expanded and sent bounding outward, making an indescribably glorious show, especially when the afternoon sunshine is pouring into it. In this fall, one of the most wonderful in the world, the water does not seem to be under the dominion of ordinary laws, but rather as if it were a living creature, full of the strength of the mountains and their huge, wild joy. From beneath heavy, throbbing blasts of spray, the broken river is seen emerging in ragged, boulder-chafed strips. These are speedily gathered into a roaring torrent, showing that the young river is still gloriously alive. On it goes, shouting, roaring, exalting its strength, passes through a gorge with sublime display of energy, then suddenly expands on a gently inclined pavement, down which it rushes in thin sheets and folds of lacework into a quiet pool, Emerald Pool, as it is called, a stopping place, a period separating two grand sentences. Resting here long enough to part with its foam bells and the gray mixtures of air, it glides quietly to the verge of the vernal precipice in a broad sheet and makes its new display in the vernal fall. Then more rapids and rock tossings down the canyon, shaded by live oak, Douglas spruce, fir, maple, and dogwood. It receives the Illinois tributary and makes a long sweep out into the level, sun-filled valley to join the other streams which, like itself, have danced and sung their way down from snowy heights to form the main Merced, the river of Merced, the river of mercy. But of this there is no end, and life, when one thinks of it, is so short. Never mind, one day in the midst of these divine glories is well worth living and toiling and starving for. Before parting with Professor Butler, he gave me a book, and I gave him one of my pencil sketches for his little son Henry, who is a favorite of mine. He used to make many visits to my room when I was a student. Never shall I forget his patriotic speeches for the Union, mounted on a tall stool when he was only 6 years old. It seems strange that visitors to Yosemite should be so little influenced by its novel grandeur, as if their eyes were bandaged and their ears stopped. Most of those I saw yesterday were looking down as if wholly unconscious of anything going on about them, while the sublime rocks were trembling with the tones of the mighty chanting congregation of waters gathered from all the mountains round about, making music that might draw angels out of heaven, yet respectable-looking, even wise-looking people were fixing bits of worms on bent pieces of wire to catch trout. Sport, they called it. Should churchgoers try to pass the time fishing in baptismal fonts while dull sermons were being preached? The so-called sport might not be so bad, but to play in the Yosemite Temple, seeking pleasure in the pain of fishes struggling for their lives, while God himself is preaching his sublimest water and stone sermons. Now I'm back at the campfire and cannot help thinking about my recognition of my friend's presence in the valley while he was 4 or 5 miles away, and while I had no means of knowing that he was not thousands of miles away. It seems supernatural, but only because it is not understood. Anyhow, it seems silly to make so much of it, while the natural and common is more truly marvelous and mysterious than the so-called supernatural. Indeed, most of the miracles we hear of are infinitely less wonderful than the commonest of natural phenomena, when fairly seen. Perhaps the invisible rays that struck me while I sat at work on the dome are something like those which attract and repel people at first sight, concerning which so much nonsense has been written. The worst apparent effect of these mysterious odd things is blindness to all that is divinely common. Hawthorne, I fancy, could weave one of his weird romances out of this little telepathic episode, the one strange marvel of my life, probably replacing my good old professor by an attractive woman.